Hi everyone, I'm Katie, host of Seakeeper's Voyages of Discovery. You might not think of the words intelligent, selective, and vulnerable when you see sensationalized news of a shark attack, or watch a movie that pits sharks against mankind. But that's exactly what great white sharks are. These apex predators have gained a reputation as endlessly hungry monsters that are to be feared at all costs. In reality, great white sharks are an incredible and ancient feat of evolution, older than trees and possessing a keen sense of smell and sharp vision even in low light. They display countershading. Their white bellies disappear into the light when looking at them from underneath, and their gray backs blend them into the shadows below when looking down at them from above. Great white sharks are an inspiration for biomimicry, or the use of evolved features in nature to produce man-made technology. The scales, or denticles, on great white sharks can simultaneously enhance lift and reduce drag, allowing them to swim efficiently through the water. Scientists have been using the design and aerodynamics of shark denticles to form more aerodynamic wetsuits, submarines, and even paint for airplanes. Now, to shed some light on a rumor, great white sharks just aren't that interested in humans. Shark attacks do happen when sharks take exploratory bites, but fatalities from them are rare. The Florida Museum of Natural History's International Shark Attack File, which is a scientifically documented comprehensive database of all known shark attacks since the early 1500s, reports that only 10 people are killed by sharks annually, while a new study from 2023 showed that humans kill more than 80 million sharks each year. Now, great white sharks are classified as vulnerable by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature due to threats such as overfishing, habitat degradation, and entanglement in fishing gear. This iconic species is more than just an apex predator. They regulate ocean ecosystems from the top down, ensuring species diversity and controlling prey species population by preying on weak and sick animals, and ultimately acting as indicators of ocean health. There have been more efforts recently to protect great white sharks, including implementing regulations on shark fishing and establishing marine protected areas where they can thrive. As we explore the remarkable world of great white sharks, it's crucial to recognize their intelligence, selective feeding behavior, and vulnerability. Joining us today are two individuals who will give us a first-hand account into the fascinating life of juvenile great white sharks and the importance of protecting these iconic species for the health of our oceans. Dr. Chris Lowe is a professor in marine biology and the director of the Shark Lab at California State University, Long Beach, where he and his students work with acoustic and satellite telemetry techniques to study the movement, behavior, and physiology of sharks, rays, and game fishes. Alongside Dr. Lowe, we're honored to be joined by Tom Petersen, the seasoned captain of the Valkyrie that carried the team on an unforgettable expedition to study these magnificent creatures. With years of experience navigating the seas, Tom brings invaluable insights into the challenges and rewards of working with white sharks in their natural habitat. In September 2023, Dr. Lowe and Tom embarked on a 3-day expedition facilitated by the International Seakeeper Society to study the behavior of juvenile white sharks, which are even less understood than their adult counterparts. Today, they'll share their experiences, discoveries, and perspectives from this expedition, offering us a glimpse into juvenile white sharks' mysterious lives and the importance of the boating community in marine research. Let's dive into our interview. Dr. Lowe, could you tell us a little bit about your background and about how you became interested in studying juvenile white sharks?
Yeah, well, actually, I grew up on Martha's Vineyard on the East Coast, and my grandfather's a commercial fisherman, and his uncles were whalers, so I have a long history of, let's say, doing things in the marine environment. So I grew up fishing, and that was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. And I remember catching a shark and not knowing what it was. I was a horrible student, and I actually had to go to the library to figure out what it was. And I found a book on sharks, and that set the bug in me. So that got me started. And I was the first in my family to ever go to college. So people could not figure out what a marine biologist was and do you get paid to do that? So it was an interesting adventure. I had to kind of figure things out on my own. And then over time, I basically got to live my dream. This is something that I always dreamed about doing, and I'm very fortunate that I've been able to do what I've been able to do. And working on white sharks was not planned. In fact, I swore I wouldn't work on white sharks. I always said they were overrated and they got too much credit and they were the prima donnas of the shark world, until I saw my first baby white shark and I thought, that thing is just too damn cute.
Oh, that's amazing. What about you, Tom? What's your background and how long have you been captaining vessels?
I guess since the day I was born, I've been in, on, or under the water. And growing up, I was a marine biology major in school. I was a dive instructor in my early days. Technically, I still am, but I just don't teach anymore. And during all that, my younger days, I spent so much time on the water on different boats. At some point in time, I started running them professionally and became a licensed captain and ran commercial dive boats in my actually my late teens, but early 20s. And that, all my friends thought that when I die, I was going to have fins on my feet, and that was my lifestyle every day. And but at some point in time, a drunk driver decided to alter my entire career. And after a severe accident that resulted in basically 6 months of learning to walk again, everything I had built up from a diving career side of it, which was post my marine biology days at school, evaporated, and due to just basically loss of business. And so while I was feeling sorry for myself and trying to figure out what am I going to do for the rest of my life, I was approached by my father to see if I would help in some marketing ideas with an insurance organization, to which I thought, oh, well, marketing sounds like fun and interesting. And he said, okay, now you need to learn about the insurance world. And, oh, that's a trick, I see. But I really enjoyed that part of the industry. And although it's not involved in the marine industry, I kept my toe in the water, so to speak, and continued to eventually, I was able to dive again, but now as a recreational diver rather than an instructor, and running boats and owning boats. And these days, my insurance business funds all my fun, which is being out on the water.
So both of you have really had this passion for some sort of involvement with the marine ecosystem ingrained in you, it seems. And you both have really inspirational backstories, so thank you so much for sharing those with us. Can you both tell us a little bit about how you learned about Seakeepers?
Well, let's see, about 15 years ago, I attended a Seakeepers event at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. It was I think I was an invited guest, if I remember, and I attended. And what caught my attention was the mission statement of Seakeepers. And if you take it down to its basic element, what was kind of presented to me during that event was the understanding that the idea is around the world. Marine sciences research projects funding keeps getting cut back more and more, as do a lot of research projects around the world. But one of the most expensive cost items for the marine research world is the cost of boats and transporting people and equipment to and from places. And Seakeepers was a band of yacht and super yacht owners who said, we have kind of a vested interest in the waterways. And, if we happen to be going to a particular place and there's a group of scientists that need to go to that particular place, wouldn't it benefit all of us if we just took them? And since we were going to go anyhow. And that again, I kind of distilled it down to a very basic concept, but it was that intriguing of an idea that sparked my interest in Seakeepers. My wife and I both rallied around the idea, and here we are 15 years later, still heavily involved with Seakeepers.
Yeah, so you've been involved with us for a long time. I bet it's been exciting to see it kind of change and evolve over the years.
Oh, most definitely.
And what about you, Dr. Lowe?
Yeah, so as Tom points out, and he understands very well, the challenges that we face in doing marine science these days. The costs are getting higher. We have a fleet of small boats, and I can't tell you how much money I spend just maintaining those and training people to use those. But if you're going to do certain types of marine science, sometimes you just need a bigger boat, and we simply can't afford them. So when I first started working on some white shark projects here, we had some overnight trips that we wanted to do, and we just couldn't. My students, I'm getting too old to sleep in a 17-foot whaler on the deck. That's just getting too hard. My students can do it because they're young, but for me, it's brutal. So we do 24-hour tracks. We put transmitters on sharks and we follow them all night long. So the best case scenario is if you have what we call a mothership. And a mothership is basically a base. It's a mobile base on the water that we can tag a shark, track it from a small boat, but we can exchange crews and they can come back to someplace relatively comfortable and get a hot meal and a shower and a warm bunk. And that's something that we typically don't get in my field. So when I first started doing these projects, I started asking around some of our local marinas, do you know anybody who'd be interested in doing this? And that's how I found out about Seakeepers, and that's how I got hooked up with Tom.
So word of mouth a bit, it seems. That's really exciting.
So I understand Seakeepers is much bigger on the East Coast, and on the West Coast, its reach isn't as great, but its need is greater. So I'd love to, continue to market it among my colleagues because, there's lots of folks out here that need to go to the Channel Islands, the offshore islands, and the costs of getting out there, it's just prohibitive. And having vessels that are equipped and let's just say comfortable to do that is part of the challenge. So I think something like Seakeepers will be very appealing to a lot of my colleagues.
I hope someday we'll have a West Coast branch, but I think until then, we do a lot of global networking, so we'll keep the West Coast in mind. All right, let's chat a little bit about the expedition that you all went on in September 2023. So you all boarded Discovery Yacht Valkyrie to study juvenile white sharks off the coast of California. Dr. Lowe, what were the specific objectives of this expedition?
Well, that's always tough because when you have a really nice boat that you can use as a mothership, we have a slew of things we always want to do. And that could range from just going out and catching and tagging sharks. And then at the same time, taking advantage of this large floating platform, we have all these other side things that we like to do simultaneously. And I have a large crew. I've got about 15 to 20 people who fight for the opportunity to go out and do this. And some of them sleep on the deck and they don't care. They love it. But, sometimes we're setting BRUVs, which are beta remote underwater video cameras, and those run for about 2 hours. And then somebody's got to pick them up and then we download and replace the cameras, put them back out. We have underwater receivers all along this area where we're trying to track these sharks. So a team of divers has to go up and dive down, pick up those receivers, download them, and replace them. Sometimes we're flying drone missions and we can actually do it from the Valkyrie, which is great. And then other times we're going to go out and do some fishing and tagging of things that white sharks might eat. So for us, we have a litany of things we want to do. Tom is an amazing captain and better yet cook, which is the other reason why my students love going out in the boat because they get fed better than they do at home. And then of course, we're constantly working. So sometimes we plan 24-hour tracks. Unfortunately, the last 2 trips out, we haven't been able to keep a shark on a track. It's shed tags, a special tag package that we have on them called smart tags. So think of it like a Fitbit for sharks with a video camera, so we can kind of see what the shark sees and measure every motion it makes to try to figure out what they're doing. So, our goal is to do that again this summer. Hopefully, if Tom's willing and the sharks are around, our goal is to go out and get a bunch of these tracks and try to peer into the daily lives of a white shark.
It seems like the Valkyrie was a really fitting platform for this expedition, and hopefully you and Tom will be able to get out there again and learn some more about these juveniles. How did the expedition contribute to the general understanding of great white sharks?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it gives us an opportunity to be out there much longer than we normally would. Our typical workday in this site is about 7 hours. And then, our boats are small. We don't really have the capacity to stay out 24 hours easily. We'd have to line the deck with fuel cans and things like that, and that's just not conducive to this kind of work. So we've learned a lot in terms of how much we can actually do on site and get things done. We've been able to use our autonomous underwater vehicle. So you can imagine Tom's yacht with something that looks like a torpedo strapped to the back, and we can launch that and run that through the area and measure the environmental conditions in 3D. That's a very expensive device. And of course, having a base to run that from and recharge that from is great. So all those things are things that we've been able to do on expeditions with Tom that we haven't been able to do. We have to do it one day at a time. And now we could do them all together. So now that we're starting to put all those pieces together, we're getting a much better idea of how these young white sharks are using these nursery areas. And it turns out that a lot of those times during the day, they're just being lazy. They're just swimming around, probably saving energy. And then at certain times of day, they turn on, and that's when they're feeding. So it's kind of interesting to see that sort of thing at night when we're not out there at night.
So Tom, what made you interested in this opportunity? How did you hear about the expedition with Dr. Lowe?
Well, my connection was with Tony Gilbert, who I guess was the first communications with Dr. Lowe. And then Tony contacted me to see if that was something that I would A, be interested in, and B, had the right equipment for, which both checked off just fine. So that was the connection there.
It seemed like a great match between this specific project and your vessel in particular.
Yes, I think so. The requirements that Dr. Lowe needed was we needed to be able to accommodate people for sleeping while at anchor off the beach there in Carpinteria. Also a platform for their two Boston whalers to tie up to at night. And then, being able to feed people. We would change people every other day or every day by having them swim through the surf. They would come out and park and then swim out to the boat. So we didn't have to go pick them up in the area, but I think all around it worked out just fine.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. While we're on the topic, can you tell us a little bit more about any specific features of Valkyrie, maybe the length, your history with this vessel, and maybe anything that contributed particularly to the expedition?
I'm not sure there's anything overly special about it pertaining to this particular expedition, but Valkyrie is 65 feet long, so it's a sizable vessel. Which I think was the requirement because we needed to be able to accommodate a number of people and lots of equipment. It has a big open bow area, so launching drones is a very easy thing because there's nothing overhead on them. Then it's got the platform in the flybridge area that sits up nice and high, so you can look down and see a lot more in the water. Not so critical with this particular expedition, but it's been useful in other things we've done with like whales and dolphins, where we've had to be able to see much further distance out there. I think just being able to sit for an extended period of times, and most of our trips with Dr. Lowe have been 2, 3, 4. We tried a 5-day, and I think we lost a generator. So it ended up being like a 4-day trip, but still multi-days. Just the vessel's equipped to accommodate all that.
So this is not the only expedition you two have been on together then. How many others have there been?
Probably 8 to 12 different expeditions.
Wow.
We were involved early on with dropping drifters for NOAA. Through Seakeepers, when Seakeepers was sponsoring that. And in fact, I think that was our first thing we ever did with them. There was a gentleman working on a PhD program who perfected the eDNA process for underwater DNA testing. And they did a number of things on board Valkyrie. And at the time, he had grants from National Geographic, and so we were all sworn to secrecy because this was all brand new technology, and they didn't want anybody to talk about it, show it, anything else until it got perfected, and ultimately it did. So that was kind of fun because we were, I think, a good year or two before the most of the world knew much about eDNA. And and then we've been involved with both whales and dolphin projects as well. So a number of different things.
Now, eDNA is a really interesting emerging topic in marine studies. By sampling ocean water, scientists can collect the mucus, feces, or tissue particles shed by organisms in the water column and can identify what species might be present at that location. And what about the number of trips or expeditions the two of you have gone on together? Do you happen to know, either of you?
We've done 3, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right. We had to cancel one. We had a one planned, but the Mother Nature intervened on that weekend, and and so we had to postpone that one. But yes, I believe that's the right number.
Hopefully this year we'll be able to fit in some more expeditions. So I want to talk a little bit about any of the discoveries that were made on this expedition. I know this is a piece that's helping, create the puzzle of juvenile white shark behavior and their lifestyles, their place in the ecosystem. But were there any kind of unexpected discoveries made during this expedition? Maybe this is a question for Dr. Lowe that you would be excited to share with us.
Sure. So on the first one that we went out with, and Tony was there to help, which was great, we did catch a juvenile white shark, and we did manage to get our smart tag on that animal. But we had some technical challenges. And again, this technology is kind of new. So everybody's tweaking it and trying to come up with better attachment methods. And we don't want it to influence the animal, but we want it to be able to record what we need. So, we caught a shark right off the bat, and we got the tag on the shark, and we let the shark go, and we tracked it for about 6 hours, and it somehow managed to rub it off. And then the tag was off, but we couldn't tell where it was. It's designed to float to the surface. But this is in the middle of the night, and my students woke me up and said, okay, it's your turn to track, but we can't, the shark doesn't seem to be moving. It doesn't make sense. So then we would go out and we would kind of try to hone down the position and look for it. We couldn't find it. The next morning, dawn came, we realized it had not moved. So therefore it could no longer be on the shark. And what had happened was the tag had got tangled in kelp. So the shark had moved through kelp, something that they always say, white sharks will never go through kelp. That is totally not true. We've demonstrated that in a couple different ways, but this is one really good one. And a team of divers had to go down and recover it. So that was an important learning lesson, and it taught us a lot about if we're going to keep these kinds of tags on sharks that do go through kelp, we have to make them less snag proof. So we're working on modified designs to make the tag less likely to get snagged up in kelp. And hopefully the next time we go out this summer, we'll be able to get a couple of those tracks in.
And that's a really interesting myth about white sharks that you were able to disprove from that. Going off of that, what are some other myths about great white sharks, or maybe juveniles, either one, that you often feel you have to dispel for people?
Well, I think this particular aggregation site, the most white sharks we've seen at this one site in a single day was 40 individuals. And they ranged anywhere from 5 feet long, which is about a baby, up to about 9 feet long, which is considered an old toddler. A 9-foot long white shark, they're hanging out doing the same thing they did when they were 5 feet long babies. So these areas are discrete. The sharks just kind of move back and forth all day long. They have to be feeding there. So right now we're looking at what they're feeding on. So using bruvs and beach stains and eDNA and all these different tools to try to figure out what they're eating. But probably the biggest discovery we found came from using drones. And I had a student that flew drone surveys at all these sites. And what he noticed was that these white sharks would swim right underneath people all the time. Surfers, swimmers didn't even know the sharks were there, but we could see them from the air. And what we're learning is that the sharks basically treat people like flotsam. They're these objects that float at the surface. They clearly aren't food because they're not bothering people, and they basically ignore them. So I think that was a big revelation, and we were able to scientifically quantify that. So in other words, we were able to demonstrate for the first time how often great whites are right next to people and completely ignoring them. So I could say that. I I could publish something and I could show people all the data in the world. But you know what convinces them the most is looking at that video. When they see that video and they see it over and over again, they go, that shark pretends like that person's not even there. And we go, yes, this is happening all the time in California. White sharks are swimming by people who are in the water all the time. They don't even know the sharks are there, and they're not bothering anybody. So what these studies are showing is that our perception of white sharks has been greatly changed based on images from Jaws and Shark Week and things like that. And it's simply not true. So they're getting a different perspective of what these sharks are really like.
I love that. I think that's so necessary. And the more you understand something, the less you kind of fear it as well. Tom, did your opinions on great white sharks change at all before and after these expeditions with Dr. Lowe?
Significantly changed for the better after being involved with this program. Before, I would always give sharks, any sharks really for that matter, but great whites especially, you give them a wide berth. One's in the area, you get out of the water, you get feet out of the water, because it's going to come up and that has that potential. And we used to say great whites are the kind of sharks that bite, come back and get you again, type of thing. I mean, that's Dr. Lowe's right. I mean, this starts because of the movie Jaws. And it was my first time out there, watching the video, as Dr. Lowe said, was just a total eye opener, because they're in 10 or 15 feet of water, and you'll see the shark from the drone go right under them, and the surfers had no idea that this thing just swam underneath them. And then the other thing that surprised me with the great whites is that if you're in the water, like on a surfboard, and they're swimming, and they may or may not see you, but if you turn quick, you scare them. Now, who in the right mind has ever heard of a great white getting scared of somebody? But they do. They spook real by that movement. Now, from my understanding, also with the project being juveniles, their primary food source is below them. It's the skates and rays on the bottom. So they're not yet looking up for their food source like seals and sea lions. So when that transition happens, I think you have to take them with a little bit different approach. But no, I really changed my perspective on how great whites, number one, how many, and two, how close around they are on the beaches in California. And I share one other quick little story. So
of course.
that first weekend, first time we were out, I'm sitting there looking at, because these research folks, they also drop down in the water to collect the data from the recorders that are underwater. And I'm sitting there going, with all these great whites, these guys are out there. Well, you know what every one of them with these researchers did in the afternoon after the day was kind of done? They jump off the boat and go swimming. So it's like, are you kidding me? With all those great whites in the water? Because they're not really a threat like we would think they would be. So very, very different experience seeing it firsthand.
Did you ever jump in?
Oh heck, no. No. The answer is I don't have a problem jumping in, but you have to remember that my duties was making sure everybody else was safe in and around the boat stuff. So my time was not necessarily in the recreational mode. It was more of being on duty.
Can you describe a little bit what those duties were and how your presence on this, I mean, apart from hosting the expedition, which is a huge help, what else were you able to contribute to this expedition, Tom?
Hosting is kind of a hard term for me to come by, because to me, I'm just a small piece in this whole puzzle. The project is really the shark research is really the focus. That's the main program. And Dr. Lowe, has to make sure everybody's got something to do, make sure they're all got the equipment they need, everything, and so he's running the whole operations there. My job was purely provide a platform make sure everybody was safe and fed, and that's really it. So it's from my perspective, it's just a small piece in the whole big puzzle that took place that weekend or during those expeditions. But that's purely it. It's just making sure everything is working.
What personal gains did you get from being a part of this expedition?
Learning, meeting new people, enjoying the interactions with a lot of very, very nice people. I enjoy just being out on the water. So, it's definitely a win-win for me.
So I think Tom's underselling his role.
Yeah, maybe you can advocate for him a little bit.
Absolutely, because my students, they're good small boat operators, they're good divers, they're used to working, in close quarters and things like that, and having specific tasks to do. And safety is baked in. We spend huge amounts of time focusing on safety. And even though we know there are sharks around, we're always cognizant, and everyone is trained in wilderness first aid. They all know what to do in case there's trauma. Tom's role as captain of his own ship and everybody's safety is really important. And the students haven't had a lot of ship time. So they've been out in lots of small boats, but they haven't spent time on ships. And I think Tom taught them a lot about seamanship, general seamanship, how to operate bigger vessels, how to be safe on bigger vessels, the kind of technology that is common now on bigger vessels, and how it's a game changer. So for many of them, as their careers progress, some of them may work on bigger ships, and the experience that they got from working with Tom was great. And it's very casual, and Tom, you may not be as aware of how influential you were in that, but I can tell you my students walked away being better sailors as a result of the experience of being on the boat with you, and it oozed. So I think that's the best kind of learning experience. And again, they're learning to, these are big operations. We have a lot of moving parts, and safety has to be a key. And Tom was important in making sure they understood that even while you're out doing the things that that you're doing, there are other layers to safety. So, for example, everybody had to do anchor watch. Some of them didn't even know what anchor watch was. But learning that, having that experience, knowing what to do in those conditions is something they never had to do before because they go out in small boats. So I think it was a great learning experience for many of them.
That's cool. It's so valuable for budding marine biologists. So, Tom, you need to toot your own horn a little bit more.
No, I feel I'm just a small piece in the overall puzzle there. But Dr. Lowe, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. I'm just doing what I enjoy, and I'm glad to be part of the project.
And that's quite a bonus as well, to get to do something where you're educating younger students and then also getting to experience something you might not have otherwise. Getting to be part of a scientific expedition and on the scientists and getting to go on a private yacht. I think those are both really cool experiences that the two worlds don't often get. So it's a really cool mismatch of worlds.
I think we shocked Tom the first time when we showed up with all our gear. We had so much gear and electronics. His poor generator was like, oh my God, I have to charge all these things. So, it's always a shocker when we show up because we've got like a truck full of gear. We had fishing nets and robots and drones and all this electronics. So, we really appreciate him accommodating us with all that stuff. And we learned that to be more successful, we had to scale back our expectations in terms of what we could accomplish. But nonetheless, every time we go out, there's a lot of equipment that has to be maintained and charged. And Tom had a great platform for supporting that.
Yeah, and it's something I learned with doing some of these expeditions is I'm going to need a bigger boat.
While we're on the topic of collaborations, were there any aspects of the expedition where it was valuable to have seakeepers involved and present on board?
Sure. I would say it was great having Tony out to see, kind of how we operate. And I know that most of the work that Seakeepers does is on the East Coast, and the West Coast has its own differences in charms and things like that. But I think having him out there was really good for him to see how well we work together, first of all, and then to be part of it. I think he got to, have some fun and get out there. And we even got him in the water a couple of times. He was a little apprehensive about that, but I eventually got in the water. I think he lost some fins or something.
Oh no.
But yeah, but other than that, it was so good. He came out twice.
It's a great learning opportunity to have a seakeeper present on board, and we can learn more about how to communicate the science that we're learning about as well, which is also a goal of this podcast. We want to be able to share with people not just results from that experience, but what actually happened and what it's like to be a marine biologist and to get to be in the private boating sector helping out that particular field. So yeah, it's really cool to get to be involved in those expeditions. I'd like to talk about some of your most memorable moments from this expedition. So, Tom, is there anything that sticks out to you in particular? Any kind of surprising, apart from everybody just jumping in with the sharks, what did you take away from this experience?
Well, I think I said a lot of it earlier, and that's just the taking what perception is the norm out there and turning it upside down and realizing that that's not the way it really is. The other thing is I guess, some of these juveniles are as Dr. Lowe said, 9-10 feet long. I mean, that is a big shark when it comes swimming by, and it's a baby, and that's quite frightening. I think one surprise that I think surprised everybody was the last day of the last one. There had been rumors of a 13-14 foot shark swimming around, and I guess for quite some time they had been hearing those rumors nah. And the last day, and in fact I think it was almost like the last hour we were on the water, like a 14 footer came swimming by, and it was right up against their Boston whaler, and there's a great picture of it where it's almost as big as the whaler. And everybody just kind of went, oh, there is a big one out here. So that may be a new research project.
That is really cool. You get to be up close and personal.
Fun to see, yeah.
Very cool. And what about for you, Dr. Lowe? What would you say was your most memorable experience coming away from this?
Well, for me, it's having the opportunity to have all my staff, or most of my staff, not all of them, out on the water at one time, and we can talk about things that we may not be able to talk about the same way in the lab, just because everybody's busy doing everything, and getting the whole group together is tough. And they love to do this. So for me, it's the opportunity to get to know my students better, because you're living with them for 4 days in close quarters, right? And then, as Tom points out, it was the last trip, the last day, the last hour. We had a shark. We anchor the Valkyrie a little bit further offshore to kind of stay out of the fray. And literally, a shark swam right up to the boat while we were eating lunch, right up to the boat. And then my students threw the drone up in the air and were tracking it. And then another team went out, jumped in the whaler with tagging equipment, and went over and tagged that shark. Wow. So, I was thinking, okay, normally we have to go searching for them. We might have to get a kilometer or two away from the boat. Now they're coming right to the boat. And I was thinking that makes this job really easy.
One thing to know about science is that it's not predictable. You just need to be there to capture the opportunity. And it's great to see that Tom and the Valkyrie were able to do that for you all. How has the partnership with Seakeepers impacted your perspective on supporting scientific research on your vessel? I know you mentioned you really enjoyed it and you would like to do it again, but if you could elaborate on that a little bit, that would be great.
Again, we go back to the mission of Seakeepers, and that's trying to put larger vessels, yachts, and super yachts together with the scientific community. It ends up being a win-win situation. From my perspective, it's really neat to be able to provide, even a little bit of assistance to these types of projects. It makes me personally feel good, but it also, I think it makes me intellectually feel better because I'm learning as I go along. It is an enjoyable aspect of the scientific world, where we're involved in as a seakeeper.
So would you encourage other private yacht owners to participate in an expedition like this?
100%. It's again, just from their personal perspective, it's very fulfilling and satisfying to know that you've been involved in a particular project. From a global perspective on the scientific world, it's invaluable to be able to offer that assistance. So again, it turns into a win-win situation. People who happy to be involved have maybe too small of boats, but maybe they can be involved in other ways. Whether it's helping out on the bigger yachts or providing voluntary assistance in other projects that are going on. So it doesn't necessarily matter how big your boat is. It matters of just being involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of different programs that boats of any size can get involved with. We do get a lot of questions about if someone's boat will be suitable for an expedition because they might be smaller, but we have a lot of smaller boats that go out and do day trips. We've been learning a lot about our local environment of Biscayne Bay here in Miami, so really anybody can be involved. It does take a unique vessel like yours to do something like, a 3, 4, 5-day expedition, but it is really cool. Hopefully we're expanding those opportunities so any vessel can be involved in some sort of scientific project, no matter the size. Dr. Lowe, can you tell us a little bit about how the general public can engage with any of the findings from this particular research expedition or from any of the scientific research that you do?
Yeah, so our project is funded by the state of California, and it was founded because of the increase in white shark population and concern for public safety. So for us, it's absolutely essential that the science that we learn gets out to the public as soon as possible, and there are opportunities for the local community to participate, whether it's doing like what Tom's doing and helping us, taking us out in his boat. We have other partners who have smaller boats that take us out diving to local sites regularly that save us from dragging our own 17-foot whaler along 100 miles of LA freeway, right? So those are all huge contributions. They're really important, and they do it voluntarily. So their interest is there, and we're always looking for new people to partner with us in that sense. And it basically helps the entire community because it's funded by taxpayers of the state of California. The other thing is, you don't even have to have a boat to participate. A lot of times we have other community members that just want to be part of what we do. And they may volunteer and they come in and help clean gear in the lab. They help paint buoys that we need to put out that are listening for tag sharks. Little things like that, but they matter. They really matter. And they learn. They like being around the students. The students are a great bunch. They're very hardworking. They're very motivated, and they want to learn from other people. So I think there's lots of opportunities there in the scientific community that are largely untapped. Citizen science is growing, so there are always new ways that people can contribute, where we have a cadre of people that fly drones who share video data with us, and we have the capacity to process that, and they're very interested in participating. So it all depends on where their interests lie and what they like to do and the time they have available.
There's one other area that Dr. Lowe, the Shark Lab routinely does public forums. They'll set up a booth or display out on the beach or somewhere in the area. And that takes people to talk to people. So again, it could be someone who's not necessarily even water related, but public relations oriented or at least likes working with the public.
So you all are getting out into the community, sharing this research, but you're also bringing people in and letting people be involved in even a small aspect of the research. So that's really great community involvement, and hopefully we can dispel some of the rumors around sharks in general with more of that.
Absolutely, and that's a big part of our program. So our public outreach and our K through 12 programs are really key. So our goal is to get the science that we're learning as soon as possible out to the public, because if not, why are we doing it? So we work very closely with all the ocean lifeguards in California. They're one of our primary clients because they're the ones that deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So they're important research partners with us as well. And then, of course, as Tom was pointing out, we have our outreach program where we go out. We have what are called shark shacks that pop up along the beaches. And we have a bunch of people, students, volunteers that are trained to, inform the public about what we know about sharks and beach safety. Our K through 12 program, we call Sharks and Robots, and we figure if we can't get kids interested in science, technology, engineering, and math using sharks and robots, we're not doing our job. So we have a group that goes out to schools and delivers a curriculum that we've developed. And then, of course, we have our own comic book series. So we have comic books on beach safety and marine pollution and how to be a shark scientist.
Do you have something that's aimed at different aspects of shark biology, shark conservation in these comic books?
Absolutely. And remember, kids can smell education a mile away. So it has to be fun. It has to be engaging. It has to have teenage drama, all those great things, right? But it's actually a very effective tool. We found that kids are learning a lot from reading these comic books because they're engaging.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect of science communication, and it's really cool that you're able to share this information with young audiences. Has this experience impacted your perspective on the importance of the private sector being involved in marine research?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as Tom pointed out at the beginning, it's hard in science to find money to do the work that we need to do. And quite often, depending on how relatable that science is to the general public, that's even a bigger challenge. But if we do have things relatable, and sharks are pretty relatable to the general public, our challenge is how to get funding to keep the research going, but make sure that people see the benefit of that. So I think that's where the private sector helps. Like right now, our state funding is not looking very promising because the state budget's not good this year. And we have to keep our program running. So we're very dependent on private and foundation support. And because of the technology we use, we cover the entire coast of California. It's an expensive program to maintain. So we need $7 million to keep us operating for the next 5 years, or else we're going to have to roll out the carpet and, start phasing things out. And I hate to see that happen because we've made great progress.
Well, we'll work on expanding our community on the West Coast. I know it's big shoes for Tom to fill to do every single expedition with you all. So maybe we could have a fleet out there doing this type of work. And everything you all have done has been so influential and so educational. So it's been really great to see this collaboration come to fruition and to see the partnership that you've had, the two of you, throughout this. Are there any other acknowledgments or final thoughts that you all would like to share before we wrap up?
Well, I would like to thank Seakeepers. I'm so thankful that I stumbled across them. And I can't tell you how great it has been to work with Tom. So for me, that has been the pleasure. I hope we can keep going out. I hope you grow on the West Coast because I have a lot of colleagues that do really cool marine things that could always benefit from having a good, safe, adequate boat for what they need to do. And I think there's plenty of those around. We just need to get some of those boaters involved in Seakeepers.
Yeah, and I have to figure out a way I can retire so I can do this more often because I do thoroughly enjoy it. But working with the Shark Lab has been a great pleasure on my end. Dr. Lowe is fantastic. All of his students and lab assistants are just very nice people, and I really enjoy just being around them. So I feel privileged to be again, a small part of the overall picture, but it's been terrific.
And I feel very privileged just to hear you all talk about your experience. So this has been an amazing conversation. I've learned so much both about white sharks and the value of privately owned vessels in marine research. So thank you both so much for joining for this discussion, and I really look forward to working with you both again soon.
Us too. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Really appreciate it.
A huge thanks to Dr. Chris Lowe and Captain Tom Petersen for sharing their experience with us today, and we can't wait to see what unfolds on their next expedition. I hope after today's episode, you're a little less fearful and a little more fascinated by these ancient and intelligent creatures that have been vital to our ocean ecosystems for millions of years. In our next episode, we're taking a trip to the Bahamas to study one of the most important and threatened animals in our oceans. We'll chat with an amazing team of scientists at the front line of coral restoration research, diving deep into their efforts to save these precious ecosystems. For more information about our expeditions, including papers published from the data collected, head to the Scientist-Led Expeditions page on www.seakeepers.org. Stay tuned for another captivating episode of Seakeepers Voyages of Discovery, where we'll continue our journey to research, educate, protect, and restore. Until next time, fair winds and following seas.